The Galactic Dominion had known of Earth for some time, though only in the vaguest sense. Humanity had been observed, categorized, and ultimately dismissed as irrelevant. A backwater species on the edge of civilized space, possessing minor technology, barely beyond their own solar system. No real military presence. No galactic influence. Nothing worth worrying about. It was this arrogance that led to the greatest mistake in the history of the Dominion. The year was 2379. For decades, humanity had sent signals into the void, hoping for contact. When the Dominion finally responded, it was with an offer of diplomacy. The United Terran Coalition, eager to join the galactic stage, assembled an envoy fleet, a peaceful delegation of ambassadors, scientists, and representatives, escorted by a handful of ceremonial warships. A show of unity, not strength. They arrived at the neutral space station Kelrath Prime, where Dominion officials greeted them with cold politeness. The Terrans, naive to the Dominion's true nature, assumed this was the beginning of a new era. Then, the betrayal came. Without warning, Dominion warships, hundreds of them, emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the envoy fleet. No demands were made. No ultimatums. The Dominion considered this a mercy. Why waste words on a species that would soon be extinct? Laser fire and railgun rounds tore through the human ships before they could raise shields. The Terran flagship, Unity's Call, detonated in a blinding explosion as Dominion plasma lances gutted it from bow to stern. The fleet, helpless and outnumbered, was annihilated in less than 10 minutes. The humans never even fired back. News of the massacre spread quickly across the Dominion, but it was treated as an afterthought. Just another species brought to heel. The Galactic Council convened briefly to discuss possible retaliation from Earth, but the idea was laughed off. They are nothing, the Dominion's High Chancellor declared. Let them weep over their dead. On Earth, the reaction was far from weeping. The images of the slaughter, silent footage of ships bursting apart, of helpless diplomats screaming as flames engulfed them, were broadcast across every human world. Billions watched in horror. Then rage. Then something else. A realization. The galaxy had drawn first blood. Now it was humanity's turn. Within hours, the United Terran Coalition declared total war against the Galactic Dominion. Every military asset was mobilized. Factories switched to wartime production overnight. AI-driven logistics accelerated fleet construction to an unimaginable pace. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, signing up by the millions. Scientists abandoned civilian projects to develop new weapons, faster-than-light drive enhancements, and experimental combat AI. The Dominion, still laughing, failed to notice what was happening. It wouldn't stay ignorant for long. The first sign that humanity wasn't simply going to die quietly came 3 weeks later, when a Dominion patrol fleet entered the Sol system to observe Earth's reaction. Expecting no real resistance, they arrived casually, scanning the planet as if it were already conquered. They found something unexpected. Hundreds of human warships, sleek, angular, and armed to the teeth, rose from Earth's orbital defenses like angry gods. They moved with terrifying coordination, executing precise, unpredictable maneuvers that Dominion ships couldn't counter. The Dominion fleet commander barely had time to react before his ships were being torn apart by missile swarms and kinetic slugs traveling at near-light speeds. The battle lasted for minutes. Not one Dominion vessel escaped. It was a message. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Dominion felt something it had never known. Fear. And the war had only just begun. The Galactic Dominion had expected humanity to crumble. To beg. To grovel for mercy. Instead, Earth had answered with war. The annihilation of the Dominion patrol fleet near Sol was dismissed at first, a minor setback, an anomaly. But as the weeks passed, intelligence reports began painting a different picture. Humanity wasn't just preparing for war. They were built for it. Across the Sol system, shipyards that had once produced civilian freighters now churned out warships in assembly line efficiency. Military production increased 1,000-fold, powered by AI-optimized logistics and automation. Terraforming efforts were put on hold as Mars, Europa, and Titan were transformed into weapons factories. Asteroids were hollowed out and turned into missile stockpiles. The United Terran Coalition had become a war machine, fueled by vengeance and necessity. Dominion strategists were baffled. No species had ever adapted to war this quickly. It took centuries for most races to develop interstellar military doctrine, yet within months, humanity had rewritten the rules of engagement. Still, the Dominion believed the outcome was inevitable. They controlled tens of thousands of systems, with fleets numbering in the millions. The Terrans had, at most, a few hundred worlds and a fledgling fleet. This was not a war they could win. So the Dominion made its next move. A force of 20 Dominion battle groups, over 4,000 warships, was dispatched to the frontier colonies. Their mission was simple: crush the Terran war effort before it could gain momentum. Destroy shipyards. Burn worlds. Erase humanity from history. The first target was New Albion, a human colony on the outskirts of Terran space. It was supposed to be an easy victory. It was a massacre, but not in the way the Dominion expected. When the Dominion fleet arrived, they found a colony bristling with defenses. Automated railgun platforms, hidden torpedo silos, and cloaked strike fighters lay in wait. As soon as the enemy ships entered orbit, the sky turned into a killing field. Missiles lanced out from the planet's surface, guided by quantum-linked AI that predicted enemy maneuvers before they happened. Railgun slugs, accelerated to near-light speed, shattered Dominion capital ships in a single impact. And then, the real nightmare began. Human ground forces, clad in mechanized exosuits and wielding plasma weaponry reverse-engineered from Dominion wreckage, launched an orbital boarding action. Not onto the enemy's capital ships, but their supply freighters and command vessels. Dominion admirals watched in horror as their own logistics network collapsed from within. Critical supply lines were severed. Entire fleets were left stranded in space without fuel or munitions. The concept of asymmetrical warfare was foreign to the Dominion. They had always fought wars of brute force, of superior numbers. But the humans had turned war into an art form. The battle for New Albion ended in less than 2 hours. Of the 4,000 Dominion warships that arrived, fewer than 300 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or left as derelict wrecks floating in the void. And the worst part? New Albion was just one of dozens of colonies the Dominion had planned to strike. Every invasion fleet suffered the same fate. Every offensive turned into a rout. The Dominion Council was in chaos. How could this be happening? Humanity had been nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. A minor species. Insignificant. And yet, they had done the impossible. A species that had barely stepped beyond its own solar system had now bloodied the most powerful empire in the galaxy. It was at that moment the Dominion realized something chilling. They had mistaken humanity's peaceful nature for weakness. They had misjudged their willingness to negotiate as fear. But humanity had never been weak. Never been afraid. They had simply never been given a reason to fight. Now, they had one. And the Dominion would soon learn what happened and you gave humans a reason for war. The Dominion had assumed humanity would follow the same predictable patterns as every other species they had conquered. They believed the Terrans would fight honorably, according to the unwritten rules of galactic warfare. They would engage in conventional battles, following established tactics and doctrines. What they failed to understand was this: humanity didn't play by anyone's rules. As the war against the Dominion continued to escalate, it became painfully clear that Terran forces were not just capable of standing toe-to-toe with the might of the galaxy's most powerful empire, they could outsmart it, outthink it, and outfight it in ways no one had ever imagined. While the Dominion's forces relied on traditional strategies, staging large fleet engagements, coordinated attacks on key infrastructure, and long, drawn-out sieges, humanity adapted with breathtaking speed. They abandoned the concept of fair war entirely, embracing tactics that would make even the most ruthless of the galaxy's conquerors wince. The first sign came in a skirmish over the ice world of Vokoth. The Dominion fleet had launched a preemptive strike on the planet's defenses, intending to wipe out human installations before they could become a threat. As the battle began, the Dominion admirals expected the Terrans to defend in typical fashion, creating a stronghold around Vokoth's primary colonies, fortifying orbital platforms, and engaging in direct combat. Instead, the humans did something shocking. Without warning, the entire Terran defense fleet scattered into smaller, independent units. Individual warships, once part of a well-coordinated fleet, now operated as guerrilla cells, using Vokoth's many moons and asteroid fields for cover. Missiles streaked from hidden silos, catching the Dominion ships off guard, while human warships disappeared into the darkness, only to reappear in entirely unexpected locations. The Dominion fleet had been trained to fight large-scale engagements, where everything was predictable, everything could be measured and accounted for. The Terrans made sure nothing was predictable. Every maneuver was designed to confuse and disorient the enemy, and it worked. But it wasn't just their ships that left the Dominion struggling to cope. The humans were equally brutal on the ground. Their military doctrine favored asymmetrical tactics, hitting where the enemy was weakest and avoiding direct conflict whenever possible. On Haxos Prime, a Dominion fortress world, the human strategy was clear: do not fight the enemy where they are strongest. Instead, they sabotaged supply routes, infiltrated enemy ranks with advanced cloaking technology, and set traps that caused the Dominion to waste resources on futile searches for phantom threats. The most effective weapon wasn't high-tech gadgets or advanced AI, but pure human ingenuity. Dominion forces were perplexed, and an entire battalion of Terran troops, armed with nothing but simple explosives and decoys, managed to collapse an entire section of the planet's defense grid. The Dominion hadn't seen it coming, not because the humans had superior technology, but because they had different ideas about war. The Dominion's reliance on technology and sheer numbers was no match for humanity's ability to adapt and innovate on the fly. Human soldiers knew how to fight dirty, and they were proud of it. One particular incident became infamous across the galaxy. On the planet Droska, a Dominion warship had dropped 100,000 elite soldiers onto the surface to cleanse it of human resistance. These soldiers were considered the best the Dominion had to offer, trained in every combat style known to the galaxy. But when they landed, they found the terrain completely unfamiliar. The humans had rigged entire forests with explosives, creating traps that used the natural environment as a deadly weapon. Droska's native wildlife, genetically altered to fight for the Terrans, launched sudden, ferocious attacks from the underbrush, catching Dominion forces by surprise. And then there were the humans themselves. Terran soldiers, augmented by powerful exosuits and combat AI, fought with an unparalleled ruthlessness. They used guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver larger Dominion forces, setting ambushes, conducting lightning raids, and retreating into the wild only to strike again when the enemy least expected it. The Dominion was losing more than just battles. They were losing respect. What terrified the Dominion more than anything was that humanity had turned war into a game of deception, unpredictability, and sheer brutality. Every encounter was a mind game. Every battlefield became a puzzle. The Terrans didn't fight the way the Dominion expected, they didn't follow the rules. And that, more than anything, began to shatter the Dominion's confidence. By the time humanity launched its first major counteroffensive against the heart of the Dominion, the war had already shifted. The Dominion fleet had learned to fear the unpredictability of the Terran battle doctrine. Every fleet they sent into battle was cautious, hesitant. They expected the unexpected, and in doing so, they were always a step behind. The day the Dominion realized that humanity had no intention of playing by their rules was the day they realized the war had already been lost. The war had already begun to change the galaxy. The Dominion, once thought invincible, was reeling. Every time they launched an offensive, humanity responded with cunning, with a will to fight that shocked the stars. But it was not just their tactics that turned the tide. It was the unyielding, unbreakable spirit of Terra, the Earth-born humans, that proved to be their greatest weapon. When the Dominion decided to turn the war to their advantage by focusing on humanity's core world, Earth itself, they believed they were making a strategic masterstroke. They knew that, with the destruction of Terra's homeworld, the Terran spirit would shatter. But they had failed to grasp the one thing that made humanity unique, their resolve. The attack came without warning. A fleet of 30 of the Dominion's largest dreadnoughts entered Earth's orbit. Accompanied by hundreds of support ships, they began an orbital bombardment that would have shattered any other species. Waves of plasma fire rained down on the planet's surface, targeting major cities and military hubs. Terran defense systems activated immediately, but they were no match for the Dominion's overwhelming firepower. As Earth's cities burned, humanity did not bow. Instead, they fought back with a ferocity that could only be described as instinctual. Automated defense grids, once thought obsolete, came online and began intercepting bombardment after bombardment, cutting through Dominion warships with precision. The human fleets, fresh from their successes on the frontier, raced to Earth's defense. It was not the numbers or technology that turned the tide, but the will of every Terran on the planet. The defenders, both military and civilian, fought with a desperation that only the last survivors of a dying world could know. Entire cities mobilized in a matter of hours, weapons were taken from abandoned armories, and every able-bodied person was either piloting a ship or fighting on the ground. It was a madness of unity, a convergence of human spirit against the overwhelming might of the Dominion. On the ground, human soldiers launched desperate raids to destroy Dominion ground forces before they could establish footholds. Using their knowledge of Earth's terrain, they set traps in the cities, creating ambushes that used their own crumbling infrastructure as weapons. The Dominion had underestimated the ingenuity of the humans. It was not just the military that stood against the invaders, but every civilian who could hold a weapon. Resistance movements erupted in every major city. Farmers, students, factory workers, all took to the streets and fields to fight the Dominion's occupying forces. They turned their homes, their cities, their very lives into weapons of defiance. And it worked. By the time the Dominion's forces attempted to land, the human resistance had already thwarted their attempts to hold any ground. Every attempt to establish a foothold in Earth's major cities was met with fierce resistance, from soldiers and civilians alike. When a Dominion force attempted to take the capital, New York, they found themselves caught in a trap. Human fighters, trained in guerrilla warfare, hit the Dominion's supply lines, cutting off reinforcements and supplies. Their fleets above Earth were being harassed by human warships that had been reinforced by smuggled, stolen, and repurposed Dominion technology. But the most terrifying part was the Terran ability to never give up. On the ground, human soldiers, barely equipped with any armor, fought Dominion forces for every inch of territory. When their comrades fell, the survivors did not flee, they fought harder. Civilians, once terrified by the appearance of the Dominion's overwhelming power, found the courage to rise up. A woman who had never held a weapon before suddenly found herself leading a group of soldiers in a raid on a Dominion supply base. Children, too young to fully understand the stakes, joined the cause by delivering crucial supplies to the front lines. Every person, from every corner of Earth, added their strength to the fight. The Dominion, seeing this relentless wave of resistance, found their once confident outlook faltering. What should have been a quick, victorious invasion had become an endless nightmare. The Dominion forces, despite their superior technology and numbers, found themselves bogged down in a world where every inch of land was defended with human determination. The battle for Earth became a war of attrition, a battle that the Dominion, despite their technological superiority, could not win. It was here, on the very soil of Terra, that the Dominion learned the most painful truth about humanity. The Terran spirit could not be broken. No matter how many cities were destroyed, no matter how many lives were lost, humanity would never surrender. They would never yield. When the Dominion fleet finally began retreating from Earth's orbit, they realized they were not just fighting a species, they were fighting a force of nature. The Terran will was an unstoppable tide, and they had underestimated it entirely. But while Earth had not fallen, the cost of the battle was staggering. Entire continents had been turned to ash. Millions of lives were lost. And yet, humanity had persevered. And with this victory came another crucial realization for the Dominion. Humanity had not only survived, they had thrived in the face of total annihilation. And the galaxy was about to see what the Terrans would do next. With Earth secured, humanity's resolve had been proven, but the Dominion's power was far from broken. The galaxy still trembled beneath the shadow of their might. Yet, the Terrans had proven one thing beyond all doubt: when pushed to the brink, humanity would rise, and when they rose, they were unstoppable. Now, the stage was set for the most audacious move yet, one that would rattle the galaxy's foundations. Humanity was no longer just reacting to Dominion attacks, they were taking the fight to them. The time had come to strike at the heart of the Dominion Empire. The target? Scylla Prime, the largest, most heavily fortified world in the Dominion's central systems. Scylla Prime was more than a strategic location, it was a symbol of Dominion dominance, the beating heart of their military and political power. The Dominion fleet's flagship, the Dominion Apex, a vessel of godlike proportions, orbited the planet like a shadow of doom, its weaponry capable of obliterating entire star systems. Taking Scylla Prime would shatter the Dominion's morale. It would strike at their very core, forcing them to confront the terrifying truth that humanity had come to their doorstep, and that they weren't leaving. Humanity knew this was a war-changing move, one that could cost them everything. The Terran High Command put all their cards on the table, marshalling every fleet, every weapon, and every soldier they could muster. This wasn't just an offensive, it was a declaration. The assault began with a surprise, a brutal barrage of ion cannon fire from Terran ships lurking in the nearby nebulae. The Dominion had expected a full-scale assault, but the Terrans, once again, had caught them off guard. Within minutes, the Dominion's outer defense perimeter was breached. Scylla Prime's orbital defenses, sophisticated and formidable, were scrambled. And then, the unthinkable happened. Humanity unleashed their ace, the Eagle Strike. A Terran invention, more myth than fact until now, a ship designed not to engage in conventional combat but to disrupt and collapse entire fleets from within. It was a massive, multi-stage assault vessel capable of hijacking enemy communications, scrambling targeting systems, and overriding the controls of Dominion warships. The Eagle Strike didn't fight the Dominion, it owned them. As the first wave of Dominion ships attempted to organize a counteroffensive, they were met with chaos. AI systems malfunctioned. Ships began firing on each other. Fleet formations collapsed into disarray. And then, when the Eagle Strike deployed its payload, an electromagnetic pulse of unprecedented power, entire Dominion fleets were reduced to floating wrecks. The mighty Dominion Apex, flagship of the Empire, found itself locked in a system-wide electronic warfare trap. It was paralyzed. Humanity's forces struck then with brutal efficiency. Hundreds of Terran warships, exploiting the temporary chaos, entered Scylla Prime's orbit, launching coordinated strikes on planetary defense systems and key Dominion military installations. The Dominion Apex, now an immobile target, was surrounded by Terran warships and bombarded with waves of missile fire and plasma blasts. The once impervious flagship, the symbol of Dominion power, was brought to its knees. Its massive weapons systems fired aimlessly, unable to lock onto targets, while its shields flickered and failed under the onslaught. Human Marines, backed by advanced mechanized units, stormed Scylla Prime's surface. The Dominion's ground forces, elite soldiers who had once been feared across the galaxy, found themselves outmatched by the relentless waves of Terran infantry, armed with new weapons developed from the wreckage of previous battles. The once impregnable citadels of Scylla Prime fell one by one. But the Dominion wasn't ready to let go of their titan so easily. In the final hours of the battle, the Dominion Apex initiated a self-destruct sequence, hoping to take the Terran fleet with it. However, the Terran response was swift. Special ops teams infiltrated the command center of the flagship, deactivating the countdown and ensuring the Apex's destruction was not a Pyrrhic victory for the Dominion. With one final, coordinated assault, the Apex was obliterated, its wreckage scattered across Scylla Prime's orbit, the symbol of Dominion might reduced to a burning husk. It was the moment the galaxy realized, humanity had killed a titan. The fall of Scylla Prime was more than a victory, it was a statement. The Dominion, once an empire so vast and powerful it seemed untouchable, had lost its heart. The invincible had been struck down. The Terran military, now unified and emboldened by the destruction of the Apex, held the initiative. But the fight was far from over. Though the Dominion had been dealt a crippling blow, their thirst for vengeance was as fierce as humanity's desire for freedom. In the wake of the Apex's destruction, the Dominion swore to crush humanity once and for all. But even they knew, deep down, that their once unshakable hold on the galaxy had now been fractured. The Titan had fallen, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The fall of Scylla Prime sent shockwaves across the galaxy, rippling out from the shattered heart of the Dominion Empire. For the first time in centuries, the once unquestioned supremacy of the Dominion was in doubt. Every system they had conquered, every fleet they had commanded, had now seen the impossible. Humanity, a species barely able to keep its own homeworld intact a few decades ago, had struck at the very foundation of the Dominion and torn it apart. The Terrans, emboldened by their victory, now turned their eyes toward the final stage of the war. It was time to end it. But this was no longer a conventional battle. This wasn't just about taking one world or another, it was about breaking the Dominion for good. Humanity knew that the Dominion would not surrender. They would not negotiate. And they would certainly not allow their empire to fall without taking everything they could down with them. The Dominion would fight to the last. In the final stages of the war, the Dominion unleashed its greatest weapon, the Star Flare. A weapon of unimaginable destruction, the Star Flare was capable of turning entire star systems into supernova-like infernos. It was the Dominion's ultimate trump card, a weapon meant to annihilate humanity's last strongholds and obliterate the very foundations of Terran civilization. The Terran leadership knew that if the Star Flare was deployed, it would be the end. Earth would be reduced to nothing more than a burned-out husk, and the entire human race would be wiped from the galactic map. But humanity was not one to be cowed by the threat of destruction. They had faced annihilation before, and every time, they had risen stronger. This time would be no different. The Terran fleets, now stronger and more battle-hardened than ever, began assembling for one final push. High Command knew that they had to strike first, before the Star Flare could be unleashed. The time had come to take the war to the very core of the Dominion, and to cripple their ability to fight back. The Terran war machine had become an unstoppable force. Their fleets had grown in size and sophistication, built on the bones of Dominion ships, salvage technology, and the brilliant ingenuity of humanity's finest engineers. But it wasn't just their fleets that made them strong, it was their resolve. The Terrans understood that this fight was no longer just a battle for survival, it was a fight for their future, for the right to live and to grow. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for every sentient species in the galaxy that had suffered under Dominion rule. And so, the Terran forces launched their final, decisive strike. The target? The Dominion Nexus, the central command hub located at the heart of the Dominion capital system. It was here that the orders were issued, the war plans devised, and the Starflare weapon was controlled. It was the brain of the Dominion's entire war effort, the key to their ability to wage destruction on a galactic scale. As the Terran fleets advanced toward the capital, the Dominion's last line of defense, a vast armada of battlecruisers, dreadnoughts, and automated weapons platforms, rushed to meet them. The two forces collided in a battle unlike any the galaxy had seen. The skies above the Dominion capital became a swirling maelstrom of lasers, missiles, and plasma fire. But the Terrans had learned the art of war. They didn't fight like the Dominion, they didn't throw their forces into the fray all at once. They struck with surgical precision, cutting through the Dominion lines with focused, pinpoint strikes. The Dominion Apex's wreckage still floated in the outer systems, a silent testament to the power of the Terran will. Now, humanity would deliver the final blow. The Dominion forces fought with desperation, throwing everything they had at the Terran advance. But it was too late. The Terran forces were too strong, too coordinated, and too determined. Slowly but surely, they pushed the Dominion back, closer and closer to the heart of the capital system. And then, the moment arrived. humanity reached the Dominion Nexus. The heart of the Empire was now within their grasp. The Terran fleet descended on the station, launching their final assault. With a precision strike, Terran commandos infiltrated the Nexus and deactivated the Starflare weapon. The Dominion had placed all their hopes in this last, devastating weapon, but the humans had beaten them at their own game. And then came the unthinkable. The Dominion leadership, realizing that their greatest weapon had been neutralized, made the only choice they had left. They attempted to flee, abandoning their entire empire. The Dominion's government, once a monolithic institution that controlled countless systems, crumbled in a matter of hours. The empire fractured, its leaders scattered across the stars. Humanity had won. The war was over. But it had come at a great cost. Entire systems had been decimated. Millions of lives had been lost. And yet, in the wake of the battle, humanity stood victorious. They had faced the might of the galaxy's greatest empire and had shattered it. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Terrans, their will unbroken, had proven what the galaxy had failed to understand: humanity was not just built for war. They were born for it. And now, the universe would know it. The Dominion had crumbled. The once mighty empire, which had reigned for millennia with an iron fist, was no more. Its leadership scattered, its fleets destroyed, and its worlds left in ruin. The Dominion's influence over the galaxy was broken. But the fall of the Dominion didn't just mark the end of a war, it marked the birth of a new age. The galaxy was forever changed, and humanity stood at the center of this transformation. The Terran fleets had returned to Earth, triumphant, their mission complete. Yet, even as they celebrated the victory, a deeper realization began to settle over them. The destruction they had wrought, the sacrifices made, and the cost of the war had left a galaxy in turmoil. The Dominion's defeat had shattered the old order, but it had also created a power vacuum, one that threatened to plunge the galaxy into chaos. Humanity had been forged in the crucible of war. But now, they had to build something new, a galaxy that would never again fall under the oppressive rule of empires and tyrants. It was no longer about survival. Now, it was about leadership. The Terran High Command convened to discuss the future. The victory over the Dominion had not come without its scars, and the galaxy was now filled with millions of displaced people, broken governments, and systems left in shambles. Humanity, having fought for their own survival, was now tasked with helping rebuild the galaxy they had so thoroughly altered. With the Dominion's collapse, numerous factions that had once cowered under its heel began to rise. Some were born from the ashes of the Dominion's former colonies, powerful races who had long been oppressed but had never known freedom. Others were independent, self-sustaining systems who had watched the Terrans rise with cautious optimism. Yet, in this new era, all eyes turned to humanity. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive. The question was whether they would become the galaxy's rulers. The Terrans, for all their strength, had never been conquerors. They were survivors, and they had fought to free the galaxy from the Dominion's grip, not to impose their own rule. But the responsibility was now thrust upon them. The galaxy needed guidance. It needed leaders who could unify the disparate factions and rebuild what had been broken. The legacy of the Dominion could not be allowed to poison the stars again. And so, the Terrans made a choice. They would offer the galaxy a new path. A path of unity. They didn't seek to rule. They didn't seek to dominate. What they offered was a coalition, a galactic council where every race, every people, would have a voice. Where no one would be enslaved or silenced again. A place where the horrors of war would be remembered, but where the future could be built in the light of cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. Humanity knew that rebuilding would take time. It would take years, decades even, to heal the wounds the Dominion had inflicted on the galaxy. But it would begin with the Terrans. With their leadership. With their vision. In the years that followed, the Terrans worked tirelessly to restore order. They formed the Intergalactic Concord, a diplomatic body composed of representatives from every free world, led by the Terrans but open to all. Together, they helped rebuild cities, repopulate devastated worlds, and restore peace to the sectors torn apart by war. But their work didn't end there. The Terrans had learned from their war with the Dominion. They had learned that the greatest weapon in the galaxy was not the strength of one empire, but the strength of many working together. Humanity sought to unite the galaxy not through fear or violence, but through collaboration, diplomacy, and shared ideals. Yet, even in this time of peace, there were those who resisted. Rogue factions, former Dominion loyalists, and those who thrived in the chaos of war still lurked in the shadows. But the Terran military, now more powerful and united than ever, stood as a beacon of security and strength. They had proven themselves in battle. Now, they would prove themselves as protectors of a new era. And through it all, humanity's legacy grew. They had shown the galaxy that, no matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would never back down. They had proven that they were not just built for war, they were built for peace. And with that peace came a new hope, one that would spread throughout the stars. The Dominion had fallen. The galaxy had been remade. And as humanity stood at the center of this new dawn, they knew that the true battle was just beginning. The battle for the future. And in that battle, humanity would be the ones who led the way.